Hello friends, I'm George, the nice medic gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. Today's video is going to be about the unboxing and my first impressions on 3 fragrances that I got a few days ago but I'm yet to try. The first one comes from the brand called Grandeur and the fragrance is called La Nuit. The second one, the fragrance itself is called Grandeur, funnily enough, but the brand here is Zimaya. And the last one is from the brand Fomo and it's called Illusion d'un Soir. So let's unbox them and try them. Now all 3 fragrances that I'm going to try out in today's video are inspirations as far as I know. For the other 2 that I'm going to show you a little bit later, I'm sure what they are inspired by. The first one though, this one, Grandeur from Zimaya, I'm not too sure what to expect. I think this is inspired by Mancera's Roses Vanille, but I'm not too sure. So let's unbox first this one and let's see if I'm correct with my assumptions. Okay, so this is how the box looks. Let's open it up. And then this is how the actual bottle looks. Has an interesting design with predominantly golden color accents. The cap seems to have metallic coating. Let's check out the sprayer and the actual scent of this fragrance. Let's see the sprayer. Sprayer is decent. And let's see what this one's like, how this one smells. Okay, so definitely a fragrance that's leaning to the feminine side, at least in the opening. I pick up quite a strong rose note out of this one, but also quite a bit of vanillic sweetness. It has this sort of an airy feel to it, like I don't know, like a bit of an ozonic feel to it. It doesn't feel very full-bodied, very thick type of rose or vanillic sweetness that this one has. Maybe there's a hint of saltiness somewhere in the background. But definitely the rose in here is the strongest note that I pick up out of the opening, with quite a bit of vanillic sweetness. Again, a bit of saltiness, and this kind of feels airy in the air. Now moving on to the second fragrance that I'm going to try out, which comes from the brand of Grandeur and it's called La Nuit. And probably looking at the tin can box, you can probably guess that this is inspired by a Jean Paul Gaultier fragrance. In this case, it's supposedly inspired by Le Mot Le Parfum from Jean Paul Gaultier. So let's open this one and let's see if that holds true. Okay, so this I think opens up from the top rather than from the bottom like the original fragrances. And yeah, this is the bottle design. So yeah, probably my guessing that this is cloning Le Mot Le Parfum will end up being correct. Let's check out the sprayer of this one. The cap is plastic and it's actually a very snug fit, very snug fit. That's interesting. Let's see the sprayer in action and let's see how this one smells. Okay, good sprayer, pressurized, great, because this is a very cheap fragrance. All right, yeah, this is a clone of Jean Paul Gaultier Le Mot Le Parfum. And actually, it's a very decent clone of Le Mot Le Parfum. Opens up very nicely with a nice amount of vanillic sweetness, a nice amount of nicely blended cardamom spiciness. There's a lavender in here that gives sort of an aromatic properties to this fragrance. Maybe feels a little bit woodsy somewhere in the background, but I think that the main notes in the opening of this fragrance are the cardamom, the lavender and the vanillic sweetness. And there's a hint of powderness from an iris note, I think, in here, just like with the original fragrance. It feels a little bit fresher, a little bit lighter compared to the original. Feels kind of like a little bit of a soapier version of the original, but definitely carries a strong Le Mot Le Parfum vibes. And now let's try the last fragrance in today's mini fragrance haul from Fomo Illusion d'un Soir. The box is very similar to the other Fomo fragrance that I already have, Gary's Den, which is inspired by your own parfum. And I just recently acquired a couple of weeks ago. Very similar bottle design, very heavy cap with metallic coating. Let's see how the sprayer here works. Not the best sprayer in the world. And let's see how this one smells. This supposedly is inspired by MFK's Grandeur, but the opening can't say it's very reminiscent of Grandeur. This feels fresher, feels more woodsy in the opening, and this feels more spicy compared to Grandeur, to be honest. I expected this to be sweeter in the opening. There's a bit of a synthetic feel out of it, which is to be expected at this price point and at the opening of a brand new fragrance. There's definitely quite a bit of ambery sweetness that's sitting somewhere in the background, vanillic sweetness as well. But this is fresher and also more spicy compared to the original fragrance, definitely. As it starts to settle down, it starts to remind me a little bit more of Grandeur, but definitely not what I was expecting, to be honest. It's an interesting fragrance. I think it's becoming more sweeter and sweeter as the seconds pass by. But definitely the opening here is quite different than what I expected and quite different compared to Grandeur from MFK. Okay, so about 1 hour has passed since I tried all 3 fragrances for the first time, and I'm going to quickly now go over the dry downs of each and every one in the same order that I began. And the first one will be Grandeur from Zimaya. The opening felt very floral, a little bit sweet, a little bit ozonic, also a little bit salty. On the dry down, this is where it actually started to become quite a bit sweeter compared to the opening. The dry down now doesn't feel as airy as the opening of this fragrance. The rose is definitely still here, but now it plays more of a support role rather than the main role that it played in the opening. The dry down is more about the sweetness, the vanillic sweetness, really ramped up in the dry down, the ambery sweetness as well. You're introduced to some ambery sweetness on the dry down. The saltiness is still somewhere in the background. Maybe there's a bit of an woodsy feel out of this fragrance, but it still feels kind of airy, but not as airy as it felt in the opening. And like with the opening, on the dry down, this still feels very feminine as a scent. And now a few words about the dry down of La Nuit from Grandeur, this one being inspired by Le Mot Le Parfum. Now, when I went off the camera, I sprayed it on my skin actually, and I also did the same with my right hand with the original fragrance, just to compare them as closely as possible. And what I can tell you is that La Nuit definitely is very heavily inspired by Le Mot Le Parfum. But again, feels a little bit more airy, feels a little bit more aromatic. I think here the sort of the most prominent things in this fragrance are the lavender and the cardamom notes. This feels a little bit more aromatic compared to the original fragrance, also feels a little bit more spicy. It lacks a bit of that vanillic sweetness and vanillic warmth that I get out of the original fragrance. Definitely the original, of course, carries a lot better quality, but La Nuit actually is very similar to the original one. And all those differences are up close. In the air, they probably smell very similar to each other. And La Nuit actually is not a bad inspiration of Le Mot Le Parfum at all. I'm actually quite happy with this fragrance. And now a few words about the dry down of Fomo's Illusion d'un Soir. This one supposedly being inspired by MFK's Grandeur. And in the opening, I was actually quite surprised how this one smelled, because it was very vaguely reminiscent of the original fragrance. I was expecting it to be closer to the original one. This in the opening felt more spicy, it felt fresher, it felt more aromatic, it lacked the sweetness and the warmth of the original fragrance. But actually, the more this dries down, the warmer and the sweeter it actually becomes. On the dry down, the vanilla note starts to become very strong. There's a very strong ambery note on the dry down of this fragrance. It's quite woodsy as well, maybe something like agar oud or gaiac oud, some sort of an woodsy note. And thought maybe a hint of tobacco note in here that adds more warmth to the dry down. And now in sort of the mid dry down, about 1 hour after I tried this one for the first time, I can see why this has been compared to Grand Soir at this point. Still feels not exactly the same. This feels like a heavy twist on the original fragrance, but I can definitely see why this gets compared to Grand Soir, but that's only on the dry down. In the opening it felt quite different. And so guys, in today's video I unboxed and tried for the first time 3 new scents for my collection. From Zimaya Grandeur, from Grandeur La Nuit, and from Fomo Illusion d'un Soir. If I have to choose 2 fragrances that so far have given me good first impressions, those will be Illusion d'un Soir from Fomo and La Nuit from Grandeur. But the Grandeur from Zimaya is also not a bad fragrance, it just leans very heavily to the feminine side, at least from my first impressions. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.